Welcome to Crafty Sourcer. If you're looking for a raw, unfiltered podcast on all things sourcing in APAC, you've come to the right place. Grab a coffee or wine and join your host and other guests as we dive deep into the complex and ever-evolving world of sourcing, keeping you informed on insights, tools, and even at times, a healthy sourcing debate or two. Now, here's your host, Denise Pereira from Kaleidosource. Settle in and let's get crafty.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone. Hi, Crafty Sourcer listeners. Once again, it's Steve Prince, guest hosting for Denise, who's currently on a break at the moment. I'm so glad you're joining us and so happy to be able to introduce my first guest, Belinda Leon. Belle is one of my colleagues here at Bending on Adelaide Bank. She works as an employment branding specialist, and I thought really what we'd be able to talk about is things like EVP, how it intersects with sourcing. Belle and I have had a whole bunch of conversations in which we've solved pretty much every issue in sourcing that has ever come our way. But I just really wanted to introduce everyone to the EVP area. You might know it by maybe a different name, or maybe you've interacted with it without knowing what it is, or maybe you're used to the classic mission statement. But I just really wanted to spend some time, have a discussion, and hopefully generate some conversation. Belle, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome. It is so great to have you on Crafty Sourcer.
Thank you for having me and bringing me on.
Yeah, no, it's great. Belle has kindly volunteered her time, and so she gets to put up with me throughout the week. One of the questions I asked her, I think the other day, was if you had to ascribe one board game to your professional life, what would it be? So I don't even know if we got that answer, Belle. What was that going to be for you?
No, well, I didn't come up with a board game. I think mine was like dot the dot, join the dots. Because it's basically my role, I feel like, is making connections and finding a picture around all of the different areas and finding meaning in meaningless dots, essentially.
Yeah. Awesome. No
and
worries.
What was yours? Yours was it Cluedo?
Mine was
Yours
Cluedo.
Was Cluedo. Yeah.
And for those of you who haven't yet seen it, I have a sizable Cluedo collection. And I worked out, talking to Belle, and maybe this is true for other sources as well, I love putting the pieces of the puzzle together and getting the answer. I love to find out the who, the where, the why, the how. That's what I love. So for episode 32 of Crafty Sourcer, let's get straight into it. Belle, could you maybe tell us a little bit, when we talk about EVP, what is EVP? What does it mean? How does it relate to talent sourcing?
Yeah, so essentially an EVP is an employee value proposition. So it's kind of the talent equivalent to a customer value proposition, which is a common kind of marketing concept. And what it really boils down to is trying to articulate and describe what makes your company what it's like to work for. So what are the differences as a place to work from you to somebody else? Some companies are much more, the Goldman Sachs, where you're going to be you're going to make lots of money, but we're going to work you 18 hours a day, 20 days a week, that kind of philosophy. Others are much more chill and vibe. So it's all about like, what kind of work environment are people looking for, and what are the types of people that are going to thrive in that environment, and trying to explain that to people. That's what it boils down to. You can get really fancy with it. You can go into, like we're doing at the moment with the bank and working with an agency to really articulate that premise and bring it to life that way. But every company has an EVP. Not all of them are articulated in that well-crafted way or not, but you have one. It's there. It exists. It's just whether or not it's articulated.
It's drawing it out. Okay, so
yeah.
I guess in terms of how sourcing and EVP intersect, you'd say it's more around allowing a statement of going out, because oftentimes as sources we get the brief and maybe they say, you might say, why do people want to work with you? And the stakeholder will say, oh, because we're a great business, because we've just won a whole bunch of business, or because we're just really good people, or we've got a great brand in the marketplace. But what you're saying is the EVP aspect of it helps draw out more than just the headline.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just like about benefits, right? Like when you are thinking about like, okay, well, what do people look for when they're looking at jobs? And we know the big basics, right? We know Australians want job work-life balance, and they want salary and benefits are important, and things like flexibility, and that stuff all is important, and that feeds into it. But there's other things that matter, and so it's all around those other unspoken parts of the psychological contract, the things that don't come up in those employment contracts about what it actually is like. So, for instance, is this an organization where we want you to be in 9 to 5 suits, ties, really corporate, uber professional? Is that the type of people that we are trying to attract, or are we more casual? Are we more relationship driven? Are we more all about collaboration, working together, or are we a really cutthroat environment? What kind of people thrive in that organization? How can we find it? And who are the type of people in the market that are going to thrive there? Because you're not going to thrive in every single organization, right? There are places where the management style is just not going to be for you, and that's not to say that managed style is bad. It's just to say that it's not going to be a good fit. So it's trying to find out and trying to articulate those types of things so that people that are drawn to that can find you, and let people know that you're not going to be for them if you're not going to be, if you're not that style, essentially, as well. So it's weird. It's one type of marketing where trying to repel people is more important almost than trying to attract people, because you're not going to be for everyone, so don't try.
Almost give them the way to kind of rule themselves out of the process.
Exactly. Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
to really help line up, okay, what are the business values and the corporate values, and how do we articulate and demonstrate them day to day? And what is the person coming in? What is their ideal candidate? What are they looking for to help match?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So how do you see sourcing and employer branding working together? Is it more, I mean, would employer branding get more involved in briefs, or would they kind of come out with kind of talking points for sources or for recruiters, or how does that work? How do you see that kind of contributing?
All of the above. Look, I think the two of us, in the way that we work, especially at the bank, is we do a lot of stuff that's kind of ahead of the funnel in a lot of ways. So my work is really trying to prevent that reflexive, oh crap, someone's resigned, now there's a mad scramble to try and fill that job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm wanting to warm the market. I'm wanting to tell our story out in the market and tell people that might not necessarily be ready to look for a job now, what kind of place we are to work and types of things that we do. So I'm trying to get that message out, and I'm trying to be strategic about what kind of roles are we looking for in the future. So what are the skills that we're going to be needing? Where are the areas that we know we're going to be doing a lot of recruitment, that we're wanting to actually have people ready to come on board before we have those roles ready for them, and working at that type of that end of the funnel. So I mean, I can get involved with job briefing, some recruitment marketing, which is different to employer branding. Recruitment marketing is much more reactive. It's much more, okay, here's a vacancy. How do I market for that? Employer branding is much more at that pre-awareness, sometimes even awareness that before candidates are even, there's not even any kind of job that's actually open. It's getting them ready at that stage. So I think the thing, and where it partners well with sourcing, is that it's that proactive approach. It's not reactive and not responsive to like immediate demands. We're trying to solve problems like 3 steps before they've even happened, right?
It's not waiting to the issue and reacting. It's going, okay. It's, if we think about sourcing as looking at passive candidates, we then can actually almost slice it up and say the EVP job is to help passive candidates turn into active passive candidates, and raise their awareness of the brand, of the company, of the opportunity.
Yeah, and so when you come and speak to them and say, "Hey, I'm Steve. I'm from Bendigo Bank, and I've got this really exciting opportunity," they're like, "Oh, yeah, and I've heard about Bendigo Bank. I've heard that this is the type of place that you are to work for. Oh, I've heard that you've got a great culture and that your people are, doing some amazing things, or I've heard about the stuff that you're doing in that space, or I've heard about this really incredible leader in this particular function in the business that's doing great things because I've seen it on LinkedIn, or I've heard from people, or, you know, those kinds of things. So that they've got that warming of the market, and their attitudes are more inclined to be interested than if they hadn't heard about us at all.
Because this is me, and I always think in analogies, one has just hit me. Rather than warming the individual person, you're warming the room.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're trying to find the individual people, whereas I'm trying to warm up the whole market and make sure that when you do go to that person, there's more chance that they've heard of us and heard more about what we do.
Sure. And would you say, I guess, EVPs done well are really a way to, I guess, translate from, because I'm just thinking back in the bad old days, it was always, here is a mission statement, here are our corporate values, you can see them on the website, and that's kind of it. Whereas I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this is more an effort to translate that into a living, breathing reality, rather than here's a piece of paper that's on the tea room wall, or here's a website.
It's like, well, this is what we say we're like. And employer branding is really kind of like, well, how do we actually prove that? What are the proof points? Here's people talking about it. I always talk about, I'm openly neurodivergent. I've ADHD. And so a lot of companies at the moment are promoting themselves as really neurodivergent friendly, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's great. And that's just marketing to me. That's just words on a page. Until I hear people that are neurodivergent talking about their experiences at that company and what the company is doing specifically for them and how they are supported to be themselves at work, I don't believe it. So that's the same with employment marketing. It's about how you actually tell those stories and get that message out in the market in a way that feels really authentic, really genuine, and really turns those values from being just words on a page to, this is how these values are actually lived. This is what it looks like. These are the values in practice. That's basically how I see it anyway.
Yeah, no, and that makes perfect sense, because I know even in the past, in places I've worked, maybe the CEOs come out and said, we support diversity, we support inclusion, we support equity, and respectfully and lovingly, it's a white guy in a suit, and they're talking about maternity leave. Now, you can have as big a cheerleader as you want. Like, I can be as big a cheerleader for mums in the workplace, but the impact of the message is lost if the messenger doesn't carry any kind of skin in the game, really.
Yeah. My old HR tutor used to call it the wall culture versus floor culture. If it's just stuck up on walls in passive aggressive notes versus actually lived and breathed in on the floor when by the people to actually working there. Yeah.
Like, show me the action, show me what you're actually doing on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Okay, which kind of leads into, Belle, how can you unlock an EVP? How can you, let's say you've just tuned into Crafty Saucer, you've never heard of EVP before, you don't, or maybe you're sitting there thinking, but we do this, but we don't, but how do I? So what makes it different? How do we get value out of it? How do we start getting our stakeholders talking, thinking, modeling the behaviors?
Yeah, and look, it really depends on your circumstances and where you're at and where you're working for or who you're trying to recruit for. Every place does have an EVP. Every organization has one. You just might not know what it is, and it might not be articulated formally. So if you've got like a fancy employer branding team, that's fantastic. They can help you with the EVP and get that message out. But that's pretty unusual still in the market, where we're still fairly specialized breed. So a lot of the places, especially if you're agency and not necessarily working in-house, you might not have that EVP crafted and messaged and packaged in a bow from an employer branding person. But there's plenty of things that you can do to start unpacking it and getting them thinking in that way. So finding out, like, okay, so what makes you as an employer? What are the things that your top talent are really excited about? What are motivating your factors for your people? What are the things that is coming through in the exit surveys, in the onboarding service? Why are people coming and joining? Why are they staying? What are your top talent thinking about it? What's the culture like? What are the things that's your expectations of your work? Are you formal? Are you casual? Are you collaborative? Are you what are those things? And it's not about trying to craft a message to promote what you think people want to hear. It's about being as authentic as possible. The things that you think are negatives are going to be negatives for people that it's negatives for, but for a lot of other people, those things are the things that they get excited about. So don't shy away from talking about the tough stuff and the hard stuff, because you want people that can see that and see opportunities. So yeah, authenticity, absolutely. And what's the reputation like? What do people think that you're like to work for versus what's the reality of working there? And what are the qualities and the values of the people that you're trying to attract as well? So,
Yeah.
I mean, just thinking about things from a slightly different perspective and looking at those kind of inherent qualities and types of things is not about culture fit and only trying to find people that think the same way. Is looking at kind of the people that are motivated by this type of work are people that will thrive here, that kind of thing.
So it's almost, rather than looking at the individual parts, it's about looking at the sum and the I guess the culture and the going. So we can talk about what we aspire to, but what is the reality of it, and how do we then present that to the market and present that to the candidates that we're sourcing, who, and again, because they're passive, they may not have, they're sitting there and using Bendigo as an example. You might be working another bank or another financial services company. You're not sitting a Monday morning, looking at opportunities. But, if you can have a clear EVP, you can kind of draw people in that way.
Yeah. And also, I mean, looking at Bendigo as an example, we're a fantastic place to work, but we're not for everyone. And there's a lot of people that would come on board and go, I can't work here. How do you get anything done? Unless you are the type of person that's motivated by the things that we tend to be motivated by and understands, like, how we work, you're going to have a frustrating time, right? So it's about trying to kind of let people know this is the type of thing that we do. This is how we think about things. We're very collaborative. We like to talk about things. We don't like to sort of impose stuff on other people. And so if I just want to get things done this way, you're going to have a very different experience coming up with people that bristle against that, and then that doesn't fly, right?
If you're coming from an environment where you need to be supported and absolutely handheld, it's one
Correct.
thing. If you're coming from a point where you need to be, it's that classic. It doesn't matter which company you're looking at. You have to kind of assess, okay, what are my skills? What are my needs? And then as sources, we then have to go, okay, what are we looking for? Because it's okay if the candidate says, look, this opportunity isn't for me, especially in say, agency sourcing. If I'm doing 10 different companies in one industry, I will find the right person if I can articulate EVP.
Yep. And that's fine. Like, we're not trying to be, the same as any other bank. We are not that. And people that come in thinking that we're going to be, the same as your NAB or your ANZ or whatever, are going to come in and go, this isn't what I was expecting. And it's trying to avoid that shock to the system and say, no, we never tried to be. This is who we are. And we're embracing the things that make us great. And we're bringing you on board to help us fix the things that, are less exciting. Or, we talk about the light and the dark side. We've got cultural traits, and there's great things that come from them. And then there's the negative side, the dark side to those traits. So it's about kind of, balance.
Balancing
really.
it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just lastly, Belle, are there any particular resources if sources are listening and they don't have an employment branding person, if they don't necessarily know, is there any particular resources you recommend, or just jump on Google and Google EVP, or is there anything you can recommend?
I mean, there's a heap of people that are doing some amazing things in this space. Mark Puncher from Employer Branding Australia, who is amazing. He's got a seminar coming up about employer branding live in a couple of weeks. James Ellis from the US is doing some amazing stuff and has quite a few books out around employer branding. There's lots of resources there. So yeah, Google is a friend, but also check out some of the top voices that are working in employer branding on LinkedIn as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. All right, Belle, I think we're at time. Thank you so very much. It's been great having you on and great really understanding a bit more about the concept of EVP and how to unlock it for sourcing. That's pretty much it. But As always, everyone, thank you so very much for joining us for episode 32. And as always, stay crafty. Thanks.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode, and we'll be back next week with another exciting episode. If you found this valuable, don't forget to subscribe and leave us a review. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, happy sourcing and stay crafty. Until next time.